We're standing on the edge of something big, and we're gonna make some changes. We're gonna make some changes.
Hi, I'm pleased to announce something very special to me, a new subscription-based service through NextAct Advisors that allows members exclusive access to personal industry insights and bespoke corporate governance knowledge. This comes in the form of blogs, personal book recommendations, and early access to the Founders Sandbox podcast episodes before they release to the public. If you want more white glove information on building your startup with information like what was in today's episode, sign up at the link in the show notes to enjoy being a special member of NextAct Advisors. As a thank you to Founders Sandbox listeners, you can use code SANDBOX25 at checkout to enjoy 25% off your membership costs. Thank you. All right. Welcome back to the Founders Sandbox. I am Brenda McCabe, your host to this monthly podcast that reaches entrepreneurs and business owners who learn about building resilient, purpose-driven, and scalable businesses with great corporate governance. Guests to this podcast are founders themselves, professional service providers, corporate board directors, and investors who, like me, want to use the power of the enterprise, be it small, medium, and large, to create change for a better world. And I do storytelling with each one of my guests that starts with their origin story. And then we'll get into the contents of the podcast with each of my guests. And we touch upon topics around resilience, scalability, and purpose-driven initiatives or what drives the guest. So thank you for joining me. And I am absolutely delighted this month to have Salvador Badillo Rios, Sal, as my guest. So thank you for joining me, Sal.
Thank you, Brenda. I'm very excited to be here.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So we met not too long ago. I am a member of Angel Capital Association and attended their national summit in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm from Columbus, Ohio, so I kind of killed two birds with one stone.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. So I've been a member for 3 years. And this year they had, for the first time, a breakout session on deep tech and dual technologies. And Sal, you were one of the panel members. And I myself love to work with deep tech companies. And so we had a lot of synchronicities. And that's when I asked you to join me eventually here in the podcast.
That's where we met. And I think it was an amazing opportunity to really connect with the angel community. I think oftentimes, there's a lot of focus on VCs, but angels really drive that early start to these companies and to these technologies. And so I wanted to make an effort to reach out to the angel community, educate, inform, angels about deep tech and a lot of the DoD opportunities that there are for startups and, potential collaborations and synergies. So I'm happy to have met you. Yeah.
So we're going to touch on a couple of those points because you do have a multifaceted career and background and diverse founder yourself of your own strategic consulting and advisory firm. So you are founder and CEO of Equitech Innovate. And it's really working towards serving underserved and overlooked founders that bring innovative and disruptive technologies to market. So kudos to you. It's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
And another hat you wear, and I don't know where you find the time in the day, frankly, but you, and this was your speaking capacity when I met you in earlier this year, you're senior associate and portfolio manager at the National Security Innovation Capital, and a component of the Defense Innovation Unit, DIU. So lots of acronyms in our U.S. Department of Defense. So NSIC and DIU. And I was fascinated because it's that particular area in which you're involved it's accelerating early stage dual use. Later on, you're going to
Hmm.
tell us what dual use is.
Yeah.
Deep tech startups toward commercialization. So again, thank you for joining me. We're going to talk about deep tech. We're going to get into also your own work that you're doing with underserved founders.
Hmm.
And I always like to have a title of our episodes. And this one,
Hmm.
I really think we're going to talk about scalable businesses. So,
Hmm.
what you're doing, particularly with NSIC and the DIU, is scaling, identifying early stage companies that truly have the promise of scaling. So,
Hmm.
scalable businesses.
Yeah.
And you in a short period of time, you have scaled, and then we'll get into the questions. But I was also very impressed with the focus of the work at the DIU and
Hmm.
NSIC. You yourself have supported 21 early stage dual use hardware, all right, not
Hmm.
software, hardware startups
Hmm.
across 12 states with over
Hmm.
$50 million over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's led on to lead on it investments of 335 million of
Hmm.
private capital and up to 20 times funded amount at up to 11 times prior to funding valuation. Amazing, amazing,
Hmm.
amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So can you describe for my, let's get into your origin story. You're a PhD aerospace engineering, first
Yeah.
generation
Hmm.
Latino,
Yeah.
LGBT. Tell me, what would be your tagline, if anything? What I mean, this mashup of deep, tell me your origin story. How did you know
Yeah.
what you're doing today?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I mean, I was thinking through the tagline and I was like, well, I think maybe one could be, life through punches, but I turn them into power and purpose. And so I think, everyone I'm sure has their own set of struggles, right? Everyone is dealt a different set of cards, right, in life. And it's really what you make of that, right? That really defines you. Um, so for me, right, I grew up here in Southern California. So I grew up in Rancho Cucamonga, about an hour east of LA without
Okay.
traffic. Um,
Mhm.
and uh, and so yeah, I grew up. My background is Mexican, so my parents are from Mexico. They met here, and I'm the oldest of of three. So I have two younger siblings. One is a year younger, and then the youngest 7 years younger, but he has uh, Down syndrome pretty severely. So I grew up in a disadvantaged background in a community where really I didn't know anyone that went to a 4 year college, no one that went into any STEM field, right? And
Oh,
so, and my parents also, right, had never gone to college. So a lot of it was just learning and figuring things out along the way. But I was lucky to have teachers, right, that believed in me, that saw sort of, something in me in school, and they would say, "Oh yeah, you need to go to college," or, they would say, "Oh, you're good at math and science," things like that. And so they would reaffirm those things. Um, but even once I got to high school, right, I really hadn't really planned for the future. I didn't really had thought about what major I wanted to go into, or what college I wanted to go. And so it was around being around other students that had thought about that a little bit better, or had parents who were engineers or doctors, that when they started asking me about it, I was like, oh, I don't know, but let me start thinking about it a little bit more. Um, and so yeah, so in my classroom, one of my teachers said, "Oh, the UC applications opened up," and so that's how I found out, that I should apply to college. There were several interests that I had, right? Music, English literature, and then STEM, right? And so I decided to go and try engineering,
okay.
and initially started with civil engineering, transitioned into mechanical, and then added aerospace, just as, being in college and taking different courses and being involved in different projects and clubs. That's sort of how my interests kind of evolved. Um, but even then, right, I didn't know about what a PhD was, right? Or venture capital, or the field that I'm in now. So a lot of it has been a bit of a learning process.
Mhm.
And I'm lucky to have had different organizations along the way geared towards, underserved communities in STEM or,
Yeah.
PhD or things like that, that help um, create awareness for me about the different opportunities. My thing is, you can't really go after something that you don't even know exists, right? So the more you're aware about different opportunities, the more you can sort of start to pave your path based on your own interests. So, yeah.
So you're a lifetime learner, although you're very young still.
Thank you for saying
Lifetime learner.
that.
But it's interesting because yesterday I was on a webinar with
Uh-huh.
the National Association of Corporate Directors. It was about
Mm,
AI and workers, right?
mm,
And interesting enough, the current generation, well, the largest generation that composes the workforce in the United States are Gen Xers, no, Gen Zers. And the average retention, so the average period of time that they're in a
mhm,
position is 2.4 years.
mhm, mhm.
The next generation is the alpha, right? They're like 13, 14. They will have up to 17 careers, is what they're saying. And so
Wow.
the
Yeah.
young, yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
you have so many opportunities. And again, I think people in your early childhood, your neighborhood, your school, those professors that saw the the ability for you with STEM related topics, they geared you
Hmm.
towards those opportunities. So
Yeah.
it's amazing the future of workforce and the
Yeah.
opportunities. So you yourself are going to get into in this podcast
Yeah.
some of the. So you get out of college, and what is your first gig? What'd you do?
Yeah, well, again, I went all the way to the PhD route. So one thing that was unique and what plugged me into DoD um, was, going into my PhD, I had the opportunity to, go to UCLA but have a unique opportunity to work with the Department of Defense. And so
Okay.
whereas most students conduct research on campus, in my case, I had the opportunity to, after I take a few of my, some of my course requirements, go to Edwards Air Force Research Lab, which is called the
Okay.
Rocket Lab, and
Hmm.
really conduct research there. And so, one, you get a lot more resources, right? Just because you're within DoD, and so you're able to really run, and create projects and do these things at a higher level, right? This research is able to conduct at a higher level, and working on also important problems to national security, to the DoD that are more applicable than
Hmm.
simply something that's just in a lab, right? That may be cool and interesting,
Hmm.
but maybe there's not, a huge focus on the application area. And so yeah, I got to work alongside other military members and other researchers at DoD and really start to look things from a national security perspective. And so,
Okay.
how is certain technologies, whether more fundamental, more applied, how is that important to sort of DoD and national security in general, as well as I got to see a lot of also the issues within traditional DoD and obstacles and sort of inefficiencies as well. And
Interesting.
so it gave me sort of this unique perspective that I would say most PhD students typically don't get. So I was very fortunate to have that. Um, and so while being there, I also got interested in an entrepreneurship program. I was
Okay.
like, I wanted to get myself out of my comfort zone, out of, the box um and really interact with people from different backgrounds, not just from the STEM background. And I loved it. I didn't know that I was going to love it, and
Yeah.
I just decided to try it one day, and I just really loved speaking with customers. I got to be part of a student-led startup, and so speaking to customers in that customer discovery phase, pitching to VCs,
Yeah.
um, brainstorming with people from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
I was like, this is where I want to be at.
Nice.
Uh, and so I thought I wanted to go into product development at a startup. And so that's, what I was gearing towards. And so taking business courses online. And again, this is when the pandemic started to hit. So
Oh, nice.
um, taking business courses online, learning more about emerging technologies like quantum and AI, um, that just interested me. Um, and then DoD found me.
Mm.
And so they were like,
Yeah.
okay, you have this unique, technical background with DoD and some knowledge, right, regarding DoD, and then interest in this startup and business, you know, business world. And so DoD was really wanted to stand up NSIC, National Security
Yes.
Innovation Capital, which focuses on early stage hardware technology. So,
Okay.
as you may know, a lot of funding tends to go towards VC funding tends to go towards software, not enough towards hardware. And often, hardware companies will resort to getting foreign capital, which at times may be considered adversarial and may compromise national security. And so DoD wanted to sort of get a hold of this a bit,
Mhm.
and so stand up this program. And so, yeah, a few of my team members and we basically were hired on board to really stand up this program. And this really involved developing the funding thesis, establishing the processes, um, eventually me running operations. But then because of my background, right, I got to
Mhm.
do a lot more and help source these startups, evaluate these startups and help fund them and then support them. So
Right.
I think naturally I just like wearing a lot of hats. It's been a very startup culture in a
Right.
way, just because we're a very small but mighty team. And so it's allowed me to do a lot as well as have a seat at the table and really sort of see things from that perspective.
I love the that you were in the early stage of standing up the
Mhm.
is it pronounced NSIC?
We usually refer it to as NSIC.
NSIC. So what are, these will be in the show notes. We have
Hmm.
a kind of infographic on
Hmm.
NSIC. What are I think there's 7 key areas of investment within the DoD.
Yeah. So again, we're a component of the Defense Innovation Unit, and
Thank you.
so DIU has a few portfolios, and so they focus on usually funding companies that are a little bit more mature, that have some VC funding, that have commercial product, and the goal there is for them to find sort of the use cases and sort of pair those gaps with and look for specific solutions to address those gaps and transition that technology into DoD. Again, we focus on the earlier stage, pre-seed to seed stage companies,
Okay.
and so however, our technology areas are aligned with DIU's portfolios. So our technology areas are autonomy, uh,
Okay.
and then sensors is weaved into that now. So advanced sensing would fall under autonomy. Energy technology, so this can
Mhm.
involve energy storage. Advanced battery chemistries is a big thing under that one.
Mhm.
Space technology,
Mhm.
and so this is satellite stuff, as well as satellite communications, things like that. Um, Telecommunications, so advanced communications technologies. And again, there's a lot of synergies with these different technologies. And then we have an emerging technologies um, area, which under that we've been edge computing hardware, electronics, photonics, as well as hypersonics
Yep.
platforms. Yeah,
Interesting. It's fascinating. It's
yeah.
fascinating.
And then within that, we have sort of funded as well companies that are in the sort of advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, but they usually align with one of the technology areas that I mentioned.
Yeah. So for my listeners, I would absolutely love you to define deep tech and dual technologies. All right.
Yeah.
because many, I have quite a large audience now, and
Yeah.
it's a concept that we don't run into. You don't go to the grocery store and buy lunch, all right? So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I even had a friend, just a close personal friend that is not in this field at all, just, asked me about that too. So, yeah, it's constantly educating, right, the audience,
right.
just because it is a crucial part of our society nowadays. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so I would say I would describe deep tech startups as sort of being distinguished by their intensive focus on sort of cutting edge technologies and scientific achievements. So they operate at the frontier of innovation. And so I would say they're characterized by sort of novel solutions that are rooted in scientific breakthroughs or,
Okay.
significant technological or scientific breakthroughs.
Mhm.
Um, and, I think where a lot of technologies or a lot of conventional startups leverage existing technologies to solve market needs, deep tech startups can often create entirely new markets or radically transform existing ones with their disruptive innovations. Um, and so the reason I think there's probably a name right for these sets of technologies is because they also face unique challenges, right, in commercializing their innovation. So one characteristic thing and challenge is long development cycles.
Yes.
So they often require years, if not even decades, right, for research and development before you even have some viable prototype, right, that may become a product. High R&D costs, right? So
Mhm.
very capital intensive. And securing funding can be challenging, especially in the early stages for these sets of technologies that are often unproven or, the market potential is not quite fully understood. Um, and so when it comes to, going to market, um, it may be a little bit more challenging because it's not just a matter of finding product market fit, but it's also about educating potential customers about educating the market right about your technology.
Right. And the dual purpose?
Yeah, so the dual use purpose really involves having both commercial and defense applications.
Mhm.
So defense tech, is sort of a focus on these DoD critical needs for
Mhm.
national security to enhance military capabilities. Um, and so the dual use aspect means really developing a product, a technology that can serve both, civilian and military purposes.
Mhm.
And so I will say there are challenges with this though, just because, the DoD aspect is mission focused, right? And so
Okay.
you have to worry about finding product mission fit in that sense.
Very
Whereas on the
important.
commercial side, you have to worry about finding product market fit. And so, it can be competing at times, right? Where, um, you know, the startup and VCs are naturally focused on revenue and increasing sort of their investment, and DoD may be focused on the mission, right?
Mhm.
And so it's a matter of really finding where you can overlap both of those missions, right? To really make progress in society. And then it's also as you're developing a technology, it's a matter of balancing as well the different requirements and applications. So yeah.
So the startups that you have been involved with,
Hmm.
have they come like spin out as a technology transfer from a university or
Hmm.
not? I mean,
Yeah.
where did these companies come from? The original ideas. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of the companies that we fund, some of the technologies have begun in a university research lab setting. However, they're usually a little bit further along before we see them
Okay.
and we fund them. So we have partnerships with different programs, including National Security Innovation Network, which is a part of DIU that really
Okay.
focuses more on really helping spin out these technologies out of a research setting, and
Right.
finding those DoD use cases. Um, and again, we also look at companies from all over the US. So, our meetings are usually virtual, which makes it easy for companies to reach us. But yeah, they come from all sorts of settings, right? Some of them have spin out from the lab, others from another company. But like I mentioned, by the time we see them and we fund them, they've already had some preliminary traction on the
Mm-hmm.
DoD side, whether that means some funding, spoken to, and DoD users
Mm-hmm.
to really develop their requirements, as well as some commercial preliminary traction, like obtaining letters of support
Right.
and things like that. Yeah.
Excellent. So about the time I met you, I'd also been working in deep tech, and I have heard
Mhm.
um, that perhaps private investment VC money had been
Mhm.
crowding out
Mhm.
um, the traditional um, investment of non-dilutive funding that was under either the DoD or SBIR, right? And
Mhm.
for like the last 20 years or so. So, and the Department of Defense, and actually under, I think it was the Obama administration, Ash Carter kind of flipped the
Mhm.
model and said we can actually do dilutive as well as non-dilutive funding
Mhm.
in order to attract again. I don't know whether you're losing the game, but to really get back into the pipeline of potential new businesses and new
Mhm.
technologies. Is that
Mhm.
and that's kind of what I've, you perceive it. I also saw that SBIR grants, VCs were no longer allowed to, right, participate probably about 8 years ago. So what have your observations been on the public versus private investment in these
Mhm.
strategic mission-driven sectors? Is
Yeah.
it true what I'm saying? Is it, I mean,
Yeah.
there's no probably, it's not black or white, right? So how
Right.
is the transition between public and private investment in these strategic sectors evolved?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so the way I would see it is, a while back, there was really a lack of communication between sort of these public and private entities. And so there wasn't much of a collaboration going on. And so, for example, with the establishment of DIU, the purpose was to really establish those public and private partnerships
Yes.
to really further innovation and especially deep tech innovation. Um, and so that was just the first goal, right? Let's improve and establish these public and private partnerships and show that we can work together to fund companies. And that was a little bit rocky in figuring out, okay, how does that work and who does what.
Right.
But I think over time, right, those uh, relationships have really become established in some way and have been fortified. And now, DIU and NSIC and all these other DoD entities, we have strong relationships with different VCs and accelerators and other types of organizations. They are aware of us and are interested in really knowing what our priorities are, and we are trying to always better communicate that to them, and work on funding companies together. So I would say that was sort of the first phase. Over time, then, I think DIU focused on, okay, let's see if this model works, right? If we can
Okay.
fund companies using OTAs, for example, these prototype uh, contracts, um, and help sort of transition some of this technology into DoD. Um, and I would say now where we're at is now we're really hyper focused on the, because we already proved we can do this. So now it's okay, let's focus on the most impactful and urgent technologies to DoD, especially given the
Right.
current geopolitical climate. And
Yes.
so now we've sort of shifted into really a focus on these high impact, uh, at large scale and high
Mhm.
urgency technologies and startups.
So it's a journey, right? It's an
It's been a
evolution.
journey, yeah. And
Yeah.
then on the hardware side, right, again, it's been a little bit different, but again, similar where, there wasn't a lot of, I would say, VC interest to really fund, especially hardware,
Right.
early stage technologies. VCs were typically, repelled by that, right, in some
Hmm.
sense, and naturally so, right? But I think, with standing up NSIC and these other organizations, there's been actually several VCs now in this pre-seed to seed stage funding hardware companies, and so I would say now the hurdle is probably as we funded these companies, now they go on to Series A, Series B, and now they need VCs at that stage, right, to really help
Yes.
them along and further their scaling, right? And so I would say more work is probably needed on that end now. Yeah,
Yeah. Very exciting times.
yeah.
And let's switch gears and let's go
Okay.
back to um, your consulting firm,
Yeah.
Equitech Innovate. Again,
Yeah.
I don't know where you find the time, but so can you showcase here what it is that you do in serving the underrepresented founders that are in these disruptive technologies? What was it that made you go out on your
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So just being in the deep tech space that I'm at and, dual use as well. One thing that I started noticing, and it's something that I've noticed even from just my own background, right, in STEM, right, is
Mhm.
sort of one, a lack of diversity and representation, right, of, different backgrounds, especially my backgrounds, right, whether it's LGBTQ, people of color, but also women. And so again, this is naturally found in a lot of the deep tech spaces, right?
Yes.
Finding leadership and innovators in that space, and that that's a whole nother conversation, right? But there's a lot of hurdles just even for people getting to that space, right?
Right.
And so naturally you find sort of a lack of talent there. And then the other thing is, once you have underserved communities in deep tech, right? Then you
Mhm.
have less of them that are aware or become deep tech founders, right?
Right.
Um, and and so then once you are a deep tech founder, right, then you have these VC funding gaps, right? That you find, right, where out of all the VC funding, right, 136 billion, right, only 1% goes to Black founders, or even smaller to, Latinx or Indigenous,
Mhm.
or to
Mhm.
women, right?
Mhm.
And especially being in the field that I am in, right, I would see very few, again, founders from underserved communities even applying to our program. But then, unfortunately, even those that did apply, sometimes the quality was just not up to par, right?
Okay.
Uh, and 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 so it does tear me a bit, in the sense that, I have compassion, but at the same time, there's a level of quality that we need to maintain and things like that. So, and that's just because they often lack some of the resources and guidance, right? And so even to get to where they're at now has been such a huge feat. Um, and so that's where I saw the opportunity to really step in and, establish my own strategic consulting and advisory firm to really help underserved founders, and give them a little bit more guidance and really help them, get their technologies to market. Bringing in my DoD expertise, my deep tech expertise, and also, in working with underserved communities throughout my career with different nonprofits and whatnot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, being that person that looks like them, right, in the room,
Mhm.
right? And you also have you're a mentor for the Stanford Latino Business Action Network, and
Yeah.
you're serving on the board of directors for Science is Elementary. And tell me, is that also part of kind of mission driven speak to me a bit about those collaborations.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, again, just because I'm interested in helping underserved founders, I must have gone, I think, to an event at Stanford, and then that's how I got plugged into to that nonprofit organization.
Okay.
But yeah, so I became a mentor, and that this was before starting Equitech Innovate, and so
Hmm.
again, that's where I also just got to focus on helping underserved founders and really guiding them, guide them through that process. Um, and then in terms of the nonprofits that I'm a board of directors for, yeah, so one of them is Science is Elementary. And so that nonprofit, we focus on really providing inspiring, innovative, high quality science experiences to
Nice.
preschool and elementary school children from underserved communities.
Hmm.
And that involves teaching students, right, training teachers as well to really build sustainable and quality sort of curriculum, and then engaging as well with different scientists and STEM professionals, and some of them may serve as role models and mentors and things like that. So again, I didn't have any sort of exposure to this. I wish I did when I was, a young kid. But I think providing that for the underserved communities is very important because that's where it begins, right? Um,
Yes,
that's you
what you get
you learn
exposed
to,
to.
yeah, you get exposed to, you learn about opportunities, and so you can dream to be a scientist or things like that. And also you get rid of those fears, right, that may intimidate you from going into STEM, right? Because now there's familiar.
Yes.
um, and then also it's important to know that uh, going to STEM doesn't necessarily mean you need to be a scientist, right? I've transitioned into this role, which is more business, right?
Hmm.
But my science background, I'm able to leverage that, and it's sort of a value add. So,
I love it. So, in the show notes, I would like to call out different ways by which my listeners can contact you. Can you
mhm.
speak to what you would like to have in the show notes? Is it your LinkedIn profile? Tell me a little bit about that. Mhm.
Yeah, so yeah, people can reach me on LinkedIn. I'm on there. Also, and www.nsic.mil. You can find
Mhm.
my LinkedIn there.
Mhm.
And also equitechinnovate.com.
Yes.
You can find my, you know, LinkedIn information there, as well as, my email, salvador@equitechinnovate.com.
Excellent. So that will be in the show notes as well as the
Okay.
infographic of NSIC.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So I am going to move into the part of the podcast that I repeat with every single guest. I have my
Hmm.
own consulting firm, Next Act Advisors, and I really work with growth stage companies on being purpose-driven, scalable, and resilient. And I'd like to ask each of
Hmm.
my guests, what does purpose-driven mean to you?
Yeah. I think to me, I've actually always been drawn to purpose-driven work. And so for me, it's the so what, right?
Yes.
So
Uh-huh.
there's a lot of cool things you can do, cool technologies. But to me, it's the why, right? And the so what behind it that really pushes me and motivates me to really do the work that I do because
Yes.
I know I'm making a difference in people's lives in one way or another, in a positive way. So
Mhm.
whether it's through, the nonprofits that I've been involved with, both at a volunteering level and then now, on the board leadership, um, or through NSIC and DIU, right, helping the war fighter and helping, with national security,
Yeah.
or now with my consulting firm and really focusing on helping underserved founders. I think that I'm just drawn to really uh, purpose-driven work that creates a positive impact in people at scale, right? And maybe this
At
leads on
scale.
to
Hmm.
question, but
Yeah.
that does it in a meaningful way. So
Right.
that moves the needle. Yeah.
I love it. So you've chosen really in alignment with your own origin story. Amazing.
Yeah.
So scalable growth. What does that mean to you? And maybe wearing your NSIC hat or what's scalable?
Yeah. So I think first in terms of like deep tech startups and going that route, the focus is first on finding product market fit
Yeah.
and really getting there. But once you do, I think scaling is really about growing, right? Growing not only your team but expanding, your product and really doing it in an impactful way. And I think along with that comes many challenges, right? That, you have to make sure your manufacturing processes, right, are in order and that can really accommodate for the volume, right, and speed at which you need to do that. And so it, I think before scaling needs to come preparedness, right?
Right.
Being prepared to grow before you do grow, because one thing I find often is, sometimes people are focused on growing, and then as you're growing, you're really finding all these things that you can't keep up with, right?
Yes.
And then unfortunately, sometimes that's where startups fail, right? And so, and it's sad because you've gone so far, right, along. And so, since you've worked so hard to get there, it's important to just take a beat and really prepare for the growth because I think that will set you up for success.
I'm going to divert a little bit from the third question.
Hmm.
I mean, product market fit in
Yeah.
software, right? But for deep technologies, it's
Hmm.
really about around technology readiness level,
Hmm. Hmm.
TRLs,
Hmm.
right? Scaling, right, to that level where you are scalable, right?
Hmm.
Can you, for my listeners again, indulge us in technology readiness levels?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So there are different, technology readiness levels that really describe sort of where your technology is in its development. Um, with NSIC, for example, we have a minimum TRL3, and so that involves at least having sort of analytical and experimental critical function and or
Mhm.
characteristic proof of concept.
Mhm.
So we don't fund, sort of paper studies or science projects, and so sort of that's a TRL level that we focus on, and as that TRL advances then you get into sort of the testing phase, right? And sort of in-field environment testing
Mhm.
and things
Mhm.
like that. So then you can further refine your technology until it's really ready for you for a proper use case. Yeah. And then I would say one thing we focus on is now is also just on the level of advancement in that TRL, right? So,
Mhm.
the more you can advance with the funding, the better. And so that involves really having a very strong product development plan, right, in place,
Nice.
so that you get more bang for your buck in a way.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. So the product roadmap.
yeah,
Thank you. Let's go back to the sandbox
yeah,
and its resilience. What does resilience
yeah.
mean to you? Mm.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, it's one thing that someone told me, they said you're very resilient. And I was like, oh, really? Thank you. And so, yeah, reflecting back in my life, right? Again, as I mentioned before, you'll be dealt different cards in life, punches, right? And sometimes that will be things that you have no control over, and sometimes there'll be consequences because, you're human and you're young and you make mistakes and you're stubborn at times or
Mhm.
things like that. And so I think resilience for me, it involves a few things. One is, not allowing that to define you. And so it means getting back up
Okay.
um, but it also means getting back up stronger and wiser. Um, at least for me, right? There's, I think, something you can learn about yourself and about the situation and about others, right? In whatever circumstance you're in. And so
Mhm.
it's really uh, making sure you learn the most you can about that particular situation so that when you do stand up and move forward, be able to do so in a more intentional and successful way, hopefully. So
Thank you. So,
yeah.
last question. Did you have fun in the sandbox today?
Oh, I had a lot of fun. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, this has been a unique experience. And so I had a great time speaking to you when we first met, and so today as well. So thank you so much for
Thank
inviting me.
you. Thank you, Sal. To my listeners, if you liked this episode with Sal Badillo Rios, CEO and founder of Equitech Innovate, as well as advisor with NSIC of the DIU, that's the Defense Innovation Unit, please sign up for the Founders Sandbox. It's released monthly. And business owners, corporate directors, and professional service providers are my guests, and they help us learn about how to build with strong governance, resilient, scalable, and purpose-driven companies to make profits for good. So signing off for this month, thank you. And again, Sal, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.